Now continuing with the poem Snake. So far we have read that the author, the poet, he was absolutely fascinated by the movements, by the graceful movements of the snake. The last line which we did was, and climb again the broken bank of my wall face. So this was the last line which we did in the previous video. Now we'll start from the next line. The poet over here says that, and as he put his head into the dreadful hole, and as he slowly drew up, snake easing his shoulders and entered farther, a sort of horror, a sort of protest against his withdrawing into that horrid black hole, deliberately going into the blackness and slowly drawing himself after. Overcame me. Now his back was turned. Now the poet says, and as he put his head into that dreadful hole, that means the poet is referring to the snake. So when the poet saw that the snake has gone back to his hiding place, which was somewhere in the wall, so he says, and as he put his head into the dreadful hole, the place where the snake lived, where the house of the snake was. Now initially he put his head inside his hole and then slowly started to draw inside the hole. So the poet says, and as he slowly drew up, that means as he slowly started to enter into his hole, snake easing his shoulders, he became absolutely relaxed. He loosened his shoulders, he loosened his entire body and entered farther. That means he moved inside the hole. Suppose this was the hiding place, so the snake started to move inside, and as he was entering inside, the entire body became absolutely loose. Now when the poet saw this, he says, a sort of horror, a sort of protest against his withdrawing. Withdrawing means as he entered into his hole, into that horrid black hole. Horrid is a dangerous, is a dreadful. Black hole, the place where the snake lived. Now the poet, though the poet admired his graceful movements, but all of a sudden, when the snake withdrew himself, the poet did not like this. A sort of a protest came in him due to the previous knowledge that the snake should be killed if the snake is golden. Now the poet further says, deliberately going into the blackness. So he was deliberately, he was purposely going into the blackness. That means he was himself. No one forced him to go. He himself started to go in his hiding place, which was in the dark, and slowly drawing himself after. That means once he quenched his thirst, he started to go back to his hiding place, and no one forced him to go. He himself decided to go into the blackness, and while going, the entire body was quite loose. Now the poet further adds, overcame me. Now his back was turned. Now the poet saw his back. The poet, he saw his back, and he did not like this thing. A sort of a protest came in him for the snake. Now the poet further adds, I looked round, I put down my pitcher, I picked up a clumsy log and threw it at the water throw with a clatter. Then he adds, I think it did not hit him. Now the poet further adds, I looked around, I put down my pitcher. That means the poet wanted to make sure if he was alone over there, if his movements could not be traced by others. So when he was sure that he was alone over there, at that time he put down his pitcher. Pitcher is a tumbler which he brought to carry the water. Now once he put down his pitcher, he further adds, I picked up a clumsy log. Clumsy is slack, loose. So he picked up a log. Log is a sort of a wooden, or we can say a sort of a round wood. So the poet says, I looked round, I put down my pitcher, I picked up a clumsy log and threw it at the water throw with a clatter. Clatter is a sound. So the first impulse was, since the snake, he was admiring, it is quite contradictory over here, that the poet was admiring the graceful movements of the snake, but at the same time the previous knowledge was reminding him that if he was a man, he should kill the snake. The snake which came to his water throw was golden in color. So the previous knowledge told him that the golden snake should be killed at all cost. So when the snake, after quenching his thirst, decided to go back to his hiding place in the dark, the poet did not like this thing. A sort of a protest arose in him, and as an impulsive action, he picked up a log and threw it towards the snake. Now the poet says, I think it did not hit him. He was not sure whether the log hit the snake or the log did not hit the snake. So we can say the snake began returning to his hole. He put in his head first, after that the shoulders, followed by the rest of the body. Now the poet was suddenly hit by the snake's voluntary return to the darkness. No one forced the snake to go to the hole. The snake himself decided to go voluntarily back to his hiding place, which was in the dark. Now he did not seem to like it. Somehow the poet did not like the snake returning back to the hole. Now the snake had turned his back towards the poet. The poet kept the pitcher down on the ground and picked up a wooden stick or the log lying on the ground nearby. Now he threw it near the water tap where the water was collected. The poet further says that he thought the stick did not hit the snake, but the part of the snake that was still out of the hole moved violently and hurriedly. Now this is clear when he further adds. This we will see in the next video.